Artist-inspired snowmen on today's Amazing Art Show. Hi, welcome to another edition of the Amazing Art Show. I'm your host, Angie Beam, and today we have got a great project. You don't need any weird stuff, but you're going to need some basic kind of supplies. So I'm going to go over those with you really, really quick. We are going to be making artist-inspired snowmen. This is super, super fun. All right, you are going to need just some regular construction paper. Just the, regular kind of notebook paper size should work just fine. And you're going to need glue, scissors, pencils. You might need some glitter. If you can get your hands on some hole punchers, now they've got the hole punchers that have the regular size hole and then also a smaller hole. And those work really nice for what we're going to be working on today. You may need some markers. If you've got any kind of a glitter paint, that will work really good too. And loose glitter is also another thing that would be really good for our project today. Of course, a brush, and also one other thing that we might be using today are some stamps that have letters on them. So if you've got anything like that around the house, these are really fun to use for this project. Also, if you've got maybe any kind of a stencil that has letters on it, you might want to pull something like that too. If not, just some really, really neat handwriting will work just fine. All right, so we are going to get started today. And we're going to do things a little differently today because normally, I just talk about one artist, we kind of move from there. But today we're actually going to do a very short little mini artist lesson. So it's going to be really quick and fast, but I'm going to just point out a couple things. You have got 4 artists that we're going to be talking about today, and I'm going to kind of really quickly go over them and their style of artwork because it's going to be pretty important to our project today. So you're going to be keeping in mind these artists as we're going through because you're going to be making a snowman like that artist would create. All right? So I want you to kind of get in the mindset of some of these artists here. So we're going to talk a little bit about them. All right, the first one that I want us to talk about is Pablo Picasso. And Pablo Picasso is a modern artist. So I'm going to throw this down here. He worked in Cubism, and he also worked on abstraction. And he liked to move things around into very strange, weird places. And what I mean by that is I might have an ear here, and I might have an ear here, and I might have a nose here, and I might have a mouth here, and my eyes might not be where they're supposed to be, and my hands and arms might not be where they're supposed to be. But in Pablo Picasso's mind, it was perfection. All right? So if you'll look here again, I believe this picture here is Woman in Mirror. And like I said, by Pablo Picasso. And what I want you to notice is the cubism. You'll notice very sharp angles. You don't see lots of smooth, rounded surfaces. You see lots of very jagged angles, points, and straight edges. All right, so that's the cubism part. You'll also see abstract, where he has got, things don't quite look normal. This particular person that he has here, she isn't too bad actually for Pablo Picasso because her eyes are where they're supposed to be, but her nose is all the way over here on the edge of her face, kind of like in a profile, and then, but her eyes are looking straight on at you. So that's abstracted in a way. And her mouth is a little weird, and you'll also notice that her hands kind of look somewhat concrete, very strange. Notice very vivid colors, but also you'll notice that he's altered the colors. They're not realistic, all right? Okay, so that is Pablo Picasso. The next one we're going to talk about is Salvador Dali, and Salvador Dali is a surrealist artist. And what that means, surrealism was like it's art that looks like it's in a dreamlike kind of state. So it's very weird and strange. Think back to some of your dreams. They don't always make sense and they're kind of weird. So Salvador Dali would paint as if he was in a dreamlike kind of state. And he had, in this particular one, the presence of memory that we're looking at here. And this one, you'll see lots of melting kind of shapes. The clocks are melting. There is some kind of a weird image here that looks as if it's melted off of something. Very vivid colors. It's realistic in a sense because some of the things that are there are very realistic looking, even though they're also kind of abstracted in a way too because they're melting and they're not quite as they would appear in normal life. Not to mention this isn't a really normal life-like kind of scene. So that's what I want you to kind of think about for him. Think about those dreamlike melting shapes. It's like it's frozen in time in a way almost. And then the next two we're going to talk about, Andy Warhol, who is a pop artist. And Andy Warhol's one of my favorites. He was just a really weird dude, but love him, love him, love him, love him, love his artwork. This example that you see here is one of his most popular ones, and pop art came from the word popular. And so Andy Warhol would take things that were popular during that time and he would change them into artwork. He would, you know, it might be something that you would see every single day, like money or a can of soup out of your closet, or just different things, fruit that you would see every single day. He also did movie stars that were really popular at that time. So in Andy Warhol's work, it is realistic, but usually the colors have been altered somehow. They're either extremely vivid, they might be a little off in some way, they might be really rich when they really shouldn't be. So he uses a very weird mixture of colors. Andy Warhol actually had a very different method for creating his artwork. He created this silk screening process, which is what we have on our t-shirts. And so a little different from what we're used to, but definitely took this, ran with it, and perfected it. So when you think of Andy Warhol, I want you to think about that screen printing. I also want you to think about everyday objects that you see every single day. All right, our last artist, very interesting fellow, Vincent van Gogh. He is a post-impressionist artist, and his most famous piece of artwork is Starry Night, which I know most of you've probably seen this before. But I chose today to show you a different picture of his because of a funny little story I'm going to tell you really quick that I always think of this when I think of him. He's one of my favorite artists, and I love him, but he was a very odd character. And at times in his life, he really, really struggled. He couldn't decide what he wanted to be, and then when he finally did decide what he wanted to be, he was like, I'm going to be a painter, and it just wasn't going too well for him. He really struggled with it a little bit, and in his whole entire lifetime, he only sold one painting. So you can imagine that that was probably pretty discouraging as an artist, that you only sold one painting your whole entire life. But he had this very interesting way of painting, and if you can look closely, or if you ever get a chance to, especially in Starry Nights, you can see it. Lots of brush strokes, these linear kind of strokes with his brush. So instead of taking his brush and painting the whole thing in this manner, he would have taken his paints and used these little dashes of lines. So you can really see those in his jacket, if you can see those here on the camera. And then also in Starry Night, you can really see he's got those spiraling kind of lines, and you can see those dash kind of marks that he made with his brush. Now, the weird thing about Vincent van Gogh, and this is what I always think about when I see him, he fell in love. Now, I know y'all are thinking, why are you telling me a story about this? But this is fascinating, but it's going to gross you out, so be ready. He fell in love with this girl, and he really, really liked her very, very much. And he sent her a letter, a love letter, and she was like, ew, I don't think so. You've only sold one painting your whole entire life. I just don't think so. And he decided, well, she obviously just does not know how much I love her. So to prove his love, he cut off his ear and he sent it to her in the mail. Now, wouldn't that make you want to go out with somebody? I don't think so. So she, of course, was completely grossed out with that, and I'm sure moved away and didn't tell anybody where she moved. But I always think about Vincent van Gogh cutting off his ear. I just think that is the most strange and morbid thing to do, to prove your love to somebody. But, you know, so be it. That's what he thought would work. So this particular picture that I'm showing you is a self-portrait that he did of himself after he had cut off his ear. So you'll notice that he's got this little bandage here, and his ear is missing. So when I think about him, I think about swirling lines. I think about those dash lines that you see in his work. And I think about the fact that he cut off his ear to get a girl. All right, so we're going to kind of keep all these ideas in mind, all of these different artists and their different aspects of work, because today your job is to pick two. You have to pick any combination of two that you want, two artists, and you are going to create a snowman in their honor, in a way. And so you are going to think, how would they have created a snowman if they were working on one? So I'm going to slide these to the side, and we're going to get started working on our snowman today. We are going to be using both geometric shapes today. Those are your circles, triangles, rectangles, all those kind of shapes those shapes that have certain rules and they have to look a certain way, your geometric shapes. And we're also going to be using some free-form organic shapes. Remember, those are kind of free to look any way they want. So we're going to be using those today to get started, and I think today I'm going to do a Pablo Picasso snowman, and I'm going to think about my second one. I may not have time to do my second one, so let's get started on the one that I know. All right, so we're going to do Pablo Picasso, or I am. It's up to you to decide which one you want to do. All right, so I'm going to just start with my scissors. If you want to, you can draw your shapes out first, but I think that I am just going to kind of freehand mine. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my shapes for my snowman, and keeping in mind that he used abstract shapes a lot, so that means, and remember that you don't have to put things where they're supposed to be because they're very abstracted. All right, so I think I'm going to use that for a head, and I think that, you know, most snowmen, traditional snowmen I should say, or snowwomen even, you know, are those traditional kind of balls of snow, the 3 balls stacked on top of each other. So try to think outside of the box and think Pablo Picasso would not have stood for just 3, you know, small, medium, large balls of snow. He would have come up with something a little bit different. And in his true Pablo Picasso fashion, I think my last shape for him is going to be a cube. It's a crooked cube, so I'm going to clean that up a little bit. All right. Now, I want you to think of a solid piece of paper that you want to put this on. I like to do one of mine on red and one on green, but it's up to you and depending on what you have. So I'm going to kind of grab my paper and start laying things out a little bit. You know, most snowmen are of snow, therefore they are on snow. So I'm going to put a little bit of snow down here at the bottom of my picture, and I'm going to put it in true Picasso fashion. So it's going to be very cubist looking. So I want sharp edges. I don't want those curved edges. All right. Clean this one up a little bit too. All right. And today, as you guys are starting to work and you're starting to glue, remember about that dot, dot, not a lot, because not only will it make your artwork look better, you won't have all that gloppy glue everywhere. So I'm just going to kind of start putting my piece together. And if you'll notice when I glued this down, I've got these edges that run off the side here. And I'm going to leave those for now, but then later I can just come back and trim my edges. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just kind of getting everything laid out first. So I think, you know what? This is just a little too perfect. Let's alter this a little bit. This is Pablo Picasso. I mean, come on, we got to get creative here, people. Think outside the box. All right, this is going to be the base. I'm going to have this be the middle part, and then this is going to be, actually, I think I want that to be a little more asymmetrical here. All right, so I've got my shapes, and I'm going to go ahead and glue those down real quick so that I can start working on arms and those different parts. I think I want that there. There we go. And don't forget, you want to have some of those traditional things for your snowmen like you normally would. So you want to have, you know, sticks for arms. You want to have the carrot nose, maybe a hat, maybe a scarf, maybe mittens. Maybe you dress your snowman in clothes. I'm not really sure. You might want to add some of that. So keep those traditional things in mind, but in the same sentence, I want you to also think about thinking outside the box. So it doesn't have to look totally normal. As a matter of fact, it needs to look somewhat different, all right? Now, Pablo Picasso, we talked about that he liked to mess around with color a little bit. Most snowmen are all white, But Pablo Picasso, he would not stand for that one bit. So I'm going to add just some other shapes onto my snowman and alter it a little bit because, I mean, we need to really make this look like a Pablo Picasso. So I'm just going to add some other colors on here. I think I'm going to come in here and maybe add this shape on here. So I'm going to make a little cut to kind of help me get it where I want it to be. There. And I'm going to glue this onto here. And I don't necessarily have to stick with, you know, the same color all throughout. His artwork, as we looked at before, extremely colorful, so don't be shy with color, especially with Pablo Picasso. I was going to get red, but since my background is red, I think I'll do something different. And I am just kind of randomly coming up with some shapes to add on here. I'm going to use a more geometric looking kind of oval that I think I'll just kind of layer in here. All right, now remember that there's no right or wrong with these, especially with Pablo Picasso. There's no right or wrong with that. Now, I pretty much got my extra shapes on there. I'm going to start working on my arms. I've got some scrap paper here, so I think I'm just going to use that. I'm going to tear off a little piece because it's a lot easier to work with a smaller piece than it is to work with a large, big piece of paper. So I usually like to tear off my pieces and then I work from there. Now, one thing that you can do with this project that'll kind of help you a little bit is you can fold your piece of paper in half and, you know, either draw out your image, or if you can just go ahead and cut out your image, and then, you know, when you get done, you'll have two. So you want to keep in mind that branches in nature are not perfectly straight, so therefore your branches should not be. So wiggle those scissors around as you're beginning to cut. And as I'm making this, I'm going to end up with, like I said, two. And the one thing I would tell you is the chances of you finding two branches to go on each side being exactly the same are pretty slim. So probably would be a good idea to, once you kind of get your shape cut out, maybe go back and eliminate some of it on one of the sides. So what I mean by that is, if I can ever get this cut out, just about finished here, trying to wiggle those scissors. All right, so I've got two. All right, now, they're not going to be found that way in nature, so I want to alter them somehow so that they look different. So what I might do is on this one here, I might leave it exactly the way it is. I think I'm going to end up having to trim that a little bit. But then on this one, instead of making it exactly the same, let's alter it somehow. So we're going to kind of trim this one off here, and I might even come in and make this one shorter. All right, but I still save myself some time because I cut them all out at the same time. And I'm going to trim that off, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that on. And this glue, my glue today, it is coming out extremely fast. All right, and I'm going to trim this one real quick. I'm going to glue this on. Now keep in mind, they don't have to go where they normally would go. So keep that in mind. So I think I'm going to do one there, and I think I may have one coming out down here. That seems true Pablo Picasso fashion to me. All right, now we need to do eyes, hat, and a nose. So I've already got some orange here, and I think I'm going to keep my nose pretty traditional. However, instead of kind of curving the tip of the carrot or nose, I think I'm going to keep it pretty geometric. All right. So as I'm going here, I'm going to go ahead and glue this on. Think about, do you want it to go in its normal location, or do you want to change it? I think I'm going to put mine up here. And then hole punchers. Your big hole punchers work pretty good for eyes. And I'm going to need at least 2 eyes. And I'm going to put put one here. And I think I'm going to put the other one right here. That's not too far off. But that one is on top of his nose. And then mouth, I'm going to do the smaller hole puncher. If you don't have the smaller hole puncher, it's no big deal. You can use the big one. All right, so I'm going to do a couple of these, and I'm going to show you a real good trick with these here in a second. All right, especially when you've got something this little that you're trying to glue on, and even these other dots. If you will kind of make a little blob of glue on a scratch sheet of paper or something, and if you will take your pencil, you can actually touch your pencil, just the very tip of it, into the glue. And, oh wait, before I do that, I've got to decide where I want to put this. I'm going to do a couple of these. Now, Pablo Picasso, mouth can go anywhere. I'm going to do his mouth half on the snowman, half in the air. All right, so back to what I was saying. You've got your pencil, put a little bit of it into the glue, and then you can pick up your little pieces very easily. And then all you have to do is, once you have them on there, you just kind of rest them down in the glue, and sometimes you have to kind of twist your pencil to get it off. And usually you don't have to reload with glue on your pencil. You can go usually 3 or 4 without having to get more glue. So that goes super, super fast. Oh, look at me, I've got 5. All right, okay, so I've got that on there. Any excess glue that you have will dry clear, but if you have any blobs that are showing, it might be a good idea because you want to have good craftsmanship. Go back, and if you'll take just a scratch sheet of paper, something that you don't need, and just lay it on top of there and kind of press some of that glue off. And then when it dries, it'll look a whole lot nicer. All right. If you want to include ears, you can include ears. I don't think I'm going to do ears on my snowman, but I am going to work on my hat a little bit. So I'm going to tear off a piece of paper again and come up with my hat shape. Let me see here. Maybe something like that. And also, you can put it anywhere you want. It doesn't necessarily have to go on top of his head. And I'm going to do a top hat. You could do a baseball hat, cowboy hat, I guess, if you wanted to. Any kind of hat you want to create. I'm just going to kind of dip this down into that little blob of glue that I had and get that on there. And let me see. I can't decide if I'm going to put my hat up there or not. Maybe I'm going to have him holding his hat. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have him holding his hat. And also, you know, you want to keep in mind that this is kind of a wintry kind of picture. So you probably would like to add some snow in your background, different things like that. Don't forget that you also probably want to include some buttons on the clothing. You might have, you know, some up on the shirt and some down on the bottom part. If you want to do a scarf, I think I'm just going to stick to some buttons here. So I'm going to punch these out. All right. I'm going to do that same technique again. I'm going to do his buttons over here. And then I'm going to do a few down here. All right. And then I'm going to pick them up with my pencil again. And don't forget, we're kind of just getting this all together, but it's those details that you're going to go back and add in just a little bit that's really going to make your artwork pop. All right, got that on there. And I think that my snowman is going to be holding a snowball, a Pablo Picasso snowball. So it's actually going to be a snow cube. And let's see, it probably wouldn't be perfectly, you know, square. So I'm going to kind of mess up the edges a little bit. All right. And I'm going to glue that in his hand, maybe like there's a snowball fight going on. So he's got his hat in one hand and a square snowball in the other. All right. Now, last little thing that I want us to talk about before we kind of move on to the next few steps is snow, and you can do a combination of small hole punches with the bigger ones, or you can do just bigger ones. It's kind of up to you on how you want to do that. You might also want to add some clouds and things like that. I think I may do some clouds here in a minute. I'm going to do some snow first. Now I will tell you one thing. Something about hole punchers and kids. You guys just start hole punching, and before you know it, you've done the whole piece of paper, and it doesn't take quite that many. So remember, I know that it's super fun, but you don't need that many. Don't be wasteful. So I'm just going to do a couple here because I know that it isn't going to take all that many. And my hole puncher is acting up as we speak. All right, so I'm going to just do a couple little dots here and there. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that snow on there real quick. Now the next thing that we're going to start talking about here in just a second are some of the extra things that you want to go back and add to your picture. I'm not going to have time to do my second snowman. We're just going to have to roll with this one, but I want you to do two, and I want to see a good difference between your two snowmen. All right, last little thing that I want to talk to you about is you can go back and add glitter. You want to go back with marker, and you can add all kinds of different designs with your marker on your snowman, on the nose, on the carrot, make it look more like a carrot. Go back with that glitter paint, and you can just kind of brush it on lightly over your snowman. You could even do a little bit on the hat. You can even do a couple little dots. You could do it on your snow pieces. Kind of brush that. Don't forget down here in the snow that we made down here. And if you've got the same kind that I've got, it's just got glitter in it, but it's clear. So it's kind of like glitter with glue already mixed in it. And that's kind of, it just dries, and it's just got a little bit of glitter shine to it. I just moved my button there. All right, so the next thing I want to talk to you about also is that you can also come in, and with your glue, you can add, some icicles coming off on your snowman. So I'm just doing some kind of lines, wiggly lines of glue that are coming down. You can also do some dots of snow coming down as well. Don't forget the bottom of your paper. You can add some good interest down there as well. And I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of glitter. Last thing that you're going to want to do with your project is I want you to think of a creative way to put your artist's name on the picture somewhere. Because you want to be able to, when other people look at your picture, they need to be able to understand the artist that created it. And yes, it was you, but you were doing it kind of through another artist and using their ideas and their ways of doing art that kind of helped inspire your project. All right, so I've got this glitter on here, and I'm going to shake it around really good so it sticks in the places that I want it to. And then one way you can save your glitter, just dump it onto another sheet of paper, give it a good shake. All right, so we're looking pretty good there. Last thing, remember those stamps that I talked to you about. This is where you might want to be creative and put your artist's name down at the bottom. And I've got actually one that I've already worked on, and I'm going to show this one to you because it's all finished since I don't have time today. All right, so I've got my words, my artist's name on here, and something else. Think about doing the names differently because they definitely wouldn't sign their names the same. So think about that. Something else that you might want to think about doing is you might want to raise up some of your shapes so that they don't lay flat, but they are raised up from the surface. So I've got my melting clocks here, and this one is kind of melting and kind of bowing off of the paper as well. And I've got different elements from there, different kind of snow, that mixed kind of small dots with the larger dots. So really play with it and be creative and have fun. Now let's go to our quote of the day. Happiness, it lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort. Vincent van Gogh. All right, boys and girls, that wraps us up for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now go out and make some amazing art.